Long before the birth of a nation called the United States, the land was alive with people. For tens of thousands of years, Native Americans built diverse and thriving societies. Their descendants remain today, including, but not limited to, 574 federally recognized tribes. The story of the present-day United States formally began in 1607, when settlers from the Kingdom of England established Jamestown in modern-day Virginia. Yet European colonization had already begun in the late 15th century, bringing wars and epidemics that devastated indigenous peoples. By the 1760s, 13 colonies had grown along the Atlantic coast, forming part of British America and the Kingdom of Great Britain. In the South, an agricultural economy was built upon enslaved labor, with millions of Africans forced across the Atlantic in chains. Conflict with Britain deepened after the British victory over France in the French and Indian Wars. Parliament sought to impose new authority, including a series of taxes and the Intolerable Acts of 1773, which stripped away colonial self-government. Resentment turned to resistance, and resistance to war. On April 19, 1775, the Revolutionary War, also known as the American War of Independence, erupted with the battles of Lexington and Concord. That June, the Second Continental Congress formed the Continental Army and unanimously chose George Washington as its commander-in-chief. A year later, on July 4, 1776, the Congress declared independence, issuing the Declaration of Independence. Finally, on September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris recognized the independence and sovereignty of the United States. In the first presidential election of 1788 to 1789, George Washington was chosen as the nation's first president. With Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton at his side, Washington sought to build a stronger central government than men like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison preferred. On March 4, 1789, the Constitution came into effect, the oldest written and codified national constitution still in force today. In 1791, a Bill of Rights was added, securing freedoms considered inalienable. The young nation soon grew. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson negotiated the Louisiana Purchase, doubling the nation's size. Settlers, driven by the idea of manifest destiny, pushed westward to the Pacific. Expansion was built on settler colonialism, often marked by bloody conflict with indigenous nations. At the same time, a central question grew sharper. Would slavery extend into these new lands? That question tore the Union apart. Following Abraham Lincoln's election as the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln served from 1861 until his assassination in 1865. He led the United States through the American Civil War, defeating the Confederate States and playing a major role in the abolition of slavery. 11 Southern states seceded to form the pro-slavery Confederate States of America. The Civil War began in April 1861 at Fort Sumter. For 4 brutal years, the nation fought itself, and at Gettysburg in 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg was a 3-day battle in the American Civil War, which was fought between the Union and Confederate armies between July 1 and July 3, 1863, in and around Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The battle, won by the Union, is widely considered the Civil War's turning point, leading to an ultimate victory of the Union and the preservation of the nation. The Battle of Gettysburg was the bloodiest battle of both the Civil War and of any battle in American military history, claiming over 50,000 combined casualties.
The Reconstruction era followed from 1865 to 1877. The federal government now claimed an explicit duty to protect individual rights. Yet after 1877, white Southern Democrats regained power, enforcing white supremacy through paramilitary violence, voter suppression, and Jim Crow laws. Meanwhile, the United States entered the Gilded Age. From the late 19th to the early 20th century, it became the world's leading industrial power, fueled by entrepreneurship, factories, railroads, and millions of immigrant workers. Inequality, corruption, and inefficiency gave rise to the Progressive Movement, which championed reforms such as the federal income tax, direct election of U.S. senators, women's suffrage, citizenship for many indigenous peoples, and even prohibition. The 20th century soon tested the nation. At first neutral in World War I, which took place on 28 July 1914 to 11 November 1918, World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict between two coalitions, the Allies, or Entente, and the Central Powers. Main areas of conflict included Europe and the Middle East, as well as parts of Africa and the Asia-Pacific. There were important developments in weaponry, including tanks, aircraft, artillery, machine guns, and chemical weapons. One of the deadliest conflicts in history, it resulted in an estimated 30 million military casualties, plus another 8 million civilian deaths from war-related causes and genocide. The movement of large numbers of people was a major factor in the deadly Spanish flu pandemic. The United States declared war on Germany in 1917, helping the Allies to victory. The Roaring Twenties followed, an age of prosperity and cultural change, until the Wall Street crash of 1929 ushered in the Great Depression. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded with the New Deal, programs that included unemployment relief and Social Security. On December 7, 1941, Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise military strike by the Empire of Japan on the United States Pacific Fleet at its naval base at Pearl Harbor on Oahu, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941. At the time, the U.S. was a neutral country in World War II. The air raid on Pearl Harbor, which was launched from aircraft carriers, resulted in the U.S. declaring war on Japan the next day. The Japanese military leadership referred to the attack as the Hawaii Operation and Operation AI and as Operation Z during its planning. And the United States entered World War II, helping defeat Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy in the European theater, and in the Pacific War, defeating Imperial Japan after using nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The war led to the U.S. occupation of Japan and the Allied occupied Germany. After World War II, a new struggle began, the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, locked in an arms race, a space race, propaganda campaigns, and proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam. At home, the 1960s brought a new struggle for justice, the Civil Rights Movement, which secured African Americans constitutional rights to vote and move freely. The Cold War began to collapse in 1991. That year, the United States led a coalition in the Gulf War against Iraq. Later the same year, the Soviet Union dissolved, leaving the U.S. as the world's sole superpower. Yet, new conflicts arose. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the War on Terror began, with long and costly campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq. The early 21st century brought further trials, the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, deepening political polarization, and the devastating COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 to 2023. Recently, the U.S. has withdrawn from Afghanistan, intervened in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and faced crises in the Middle East, including the Red Sea conflict with the Houthi movement in Yemen and the American bombing of Iran during the Iran-Israel War. This, then, is the history of the United States, a story of liberty and struggle, power and contradiction, expansion and reform. From native nations to Jamestown, From Gettysburg to Pearl Harbor, from the Cold War to the present, it remains a story still unfinished, still being written,